So used. Maybe after that will start to quit in New York City.
Was there some inherent value to them?
Oh yeah,
We got a conference.
and of course it depends on is the person working. If that's the only way you're going to be able to do some business, you're not going to make it sad because you don't have any change to get from them. You're going to be more inclined to spend it, even if it's not efficient. So it varies. Sometimes they were very popular, other times you couldn't do anything. So, but they did a lot. We are fortunate. Alexander Hamilton, when we came up with our own currency after, we opted not to have living pictures, not even George Washington. The coinage had a propaganda value. It showed the king or the queen or the coat of arms. This was who you owed your money to. This is who you owed your loyalty to. Imagine that if you went into somewhere today and you had to choose between $20 versus $100, that would be awkward. So
I mean, we should, I don't think split any of it.
yes,
I mean, just take it out of his will, it's ours.
won so many of the battles in the war. Won the majority of the battles.
So we were saying,
Yeah, this is one of Native Americans who have the status as well as a weapon. It's actually a kite company, and before and after the battle, we did sit around and have a conversation. And yes, I recall the case ideas of it. They would make the handle, and they'd go off and decorate it. Europeans would cast the grass, and it would be a trade item that would be traded for beaver land. Yeah, this is as much a status symbol as it is as a weapon.
ceremony.
Yeah. Of course, we not having enough guns to save everyone.
You see the medical equipment for surgery? Yeah, look at that.
That actually spilled alcohol on a patient, and the patient got better, so he began soaking his bandages in alcohol and basically just liquor. And he had a good, seemed to have a good rate with that, but that didn't really spread much beyond him. Wasn't until the 1860s.
Right during the Civil War, that's when a lot of medical things got progress.
Right. They had anesthesia by the Civil War, so they could take their time a little bit better.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the whole thing that was being developed in Europe at the time of the antiseptic surgery and later aseptic surgery didn't make it here in time for the Civil War.
I thought that they had even some posters of opium and things like that for it.
Opium, yes. Opium in the 18th century, but that is very good for the pain, the chronic pain after the surgery.
Afterwards, not during.
Not the acute pain during the surgery.
Okay. So no morphine or anything like that.
Well, they did use it, but it wasn't. It didn't prevent the acute pain during the surgery. But yes, they used it afterwards. Philip Schuyler used a lot for his gout. They did try that, and they tried datura or jimson weed, was also used as a somewhat of an anesthetic. The one thing they didn't use, despite the pirate movies, they did not get the person drunk. Yeah. Well, the thing about the alcohol is it's a blood thinner.
Right,
So if you got the person drunk to the point where they were insensible to the surgery, they had a greater chance
of bleeding out. Right.
So they did often give the person just a glass of alcohol to steady their nerves, but the rum is more for the surgeon than for the patient.
Right. And these are cupping cups,
class.
right?
Yep.
What would they use for?
Well,
I know what they use for now, but what were used for back in the day?
Same thing. The idea was to bring humors closer to the surface of the skin. So either you were moving around the body to adjust the balance in the body, or you were trying to get that close to the surface so you could remove it. You rubbed glycerin on it to create a seal, and you heated it either with a spirit lamp or sometimes burning paper inside. And then you raised this great big blister on the back, and if you really wanted to get the blister fluid out, is when your humors, you used a scarificator like those. Those have a scarificator, yeah, and that has 16 razor sharp blades into it. You press a button, they pop out and lacerate the blister. It begins draining. Give you a case where that was done. England's King George, when he had his famous bout of insanity, 1789. One of the first things they tried was to blister his back and scarificate the blisters, believing they would draw the offensive humors out of his skull. And they were quite surprised to find out that the more they did that, the more agitated he became.
Yes, I would think so. I would think so.
He eventually kind of recovered from it, probably more on his own than from anything the doctors were doing. But he did relapse, and eventually he passed away in the throes of that kind of an illness. But he had many periods of lucidity in between that. So he did come back to the throne.
Did they use I know like in some movies they use like a firebrand to seal wounds. Did they use that?
Well, if you go back to the 1500s and 1600s, and then occasionally out in the West where there was nothing else, yes, they used to put hot iron onto it. This could be a cauterizing iron or a blistering iron, but for most surgeons, especially those that had any training, they had learned that you had a much better chance of surviving and the wound staying closed and not opening up and bleeding if you took the time to do some tying off the blood vessels.
Right.
You would use a tool called a tenaculum. Is this one right there? You would tie pieces of catgut thread around it, and then you use that to hook into the artery. You pull it out and tie it off. And if that was done correctly, you had much better chance.
Well, I've decided I'm glad I'm alive now, sincerely.
And what is this tool here?
Oh, those are obstetrical forceps. And in the 18th century, doctors were beginning to move into the territory that had once been entirely relegated to midwives. And despite the fact of later medical historians in the 19th century, the more recent historical data has shown that the women at the time would be much better off with a midwife than they would with a doctor. The midwives were less intrusive. They would intervene much less often, and would spread less childbed fever and so forth. So the doctors were actually, in many cases, not doing the patient a favor by moving in on the midwives.
Are all these tools from the 1700s?
Well,
they seem very sophisticated.
Well, they're all, let's say, either from that time or copies of things from that time. Yeah, if they had this nice shiny, they're a reproduction. This one's an exception. It's from it's dated 1858, but the principle is the same. The only thing that's different from an 18th century one is that they had this little device to keep the tongue from closing very far. So that's a little bit of a thing. This stethoscope is 1819. So So that's a little bit a bit later, but kind of shows one of the advancements, basically. Yeah, you hold it up to the chest. French physician René Lagnac also had his own little woodworking shop, and he, being a gentleman, he did not want to put his ear up to a woman's breast to hear her heart. So he came up with that so that he could keep the proper respectful distance, and he found that he actually could hear the heart better with that. And so the whole idea of it's called auscultation was born from that. So that's what gives rise to the stethoscope. They kind of have it as a badge.
What's that?
You see the doctors and nurses and so forth will always have their stethoscope.
Oh, yeah.